special treat for you on the podcast today. My guest, Gaynete Jones, hails from the little island of Bermuda, but she has built a massive personal brand for herself, and she really specializes in helping millennial women build and monetize their passions. And she's got an incredible track record and resume. If you look her up, she's been featured in Refinery 29. She writes for Black Enterprise. She's been featured in Huffington Post, Success Magazine. I mean, the media features go on and on. She's got a big social following. But part of why, really, the reason why I wanted to have her on is that I met her personally at a mastermind event that I went to a couple of months ago through Meeting of the Minds, the mastermind that I'm a part of. And she and we were recommended to meet each other by the organizer, Jared. And so she and I had lunch together before we went into the main meeting. And immediately, she was just the kindest, truest, like coolest, most chill, laid back person, even though she's got all of these accomplishments. She's got a best-selling book. The person she is on the inside is very much the person that you see online. And I love people like that, where they are just real. And what I wanted to learn from her and share with you today are just the different ways in which she's created a level of success that she has in her life, and the ways that she's built a large platform, but done it from a place of being just a very real person. She's not ego-led. And so she shares a lot of really, I think, good tactical takeaways for anyone who's looking to build an audience, or anyone who is looking to get better results in their life and their personal brand in less time. And so she talks on the podcast today about how she literally went from not writing to writing a best-selling book in 3 months. She talks about a story of how being held at gunpoint hostage changed her life in 2005. And she also talks about some of the ways that she's built this large social following, all by building deeper connections with people. And so there's so much goodness in here if you're looking for an example and a role model of how to really build an influential brand, but do it while being aligned with your values and your ethics and what you believe, and while really making a big impact in the world. And so I love this conversation. We went deep in this, but I think you're really, really going to get a lot out of it. And I think you're going to fall in love with her as well. So I can't wait to share this with you, and get ready for an amazing conversation and interview with Gaynete. Gaynete, welcome to the Instant Impact Podcast. I am so, so glad and just feeling blessed to have you here today.
Thank you for the invite. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be so much fun. So for people who are not yet familiar with you and who you are, can you share just a little bit of your background, who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Gaynete Jones. I'm actually from the little island of Bermuda. Lisa's been here. And I like to call myself, recently actually, I started calling myself the biz and book whisperer for millennials. So basically I assist millennials to write their books, aspiring millennials to self-publish successfully, as well as assisting those who want to build their business, that are at the beginning of building their business, or who are seasoned but want more growth, to help them do that successfully as well through brand strategies and using online platforms.
It's amazing. Yeah. And it's incredible to me what a brand you've built for yourself. And we're going to get into a little bit more of like your backstory and how being on the island influenced you. But, you and I have gotten to know each other now for just the past couple of months, but it's like, now that I know of you, I feel like you're everywhere. and now you're here too.
Algorithms. So like, here, Elise, take her again.
Am I being retargeted like every single day I go online? So you have just some amazing, amazing life stories, and you have been through a number of things that I think for a lot of people would have really like shut them down or made them feel super defeated. But one thing that you do talk about on your website that I'd love to hear a little bit more about is the story of being held hostage at gunpoint and how that changed your life. So do you mind taking us back to what happened and what change did that create in the way that you live?
Oh, for sure. So I was a Rotary Exchange student back in 2004 to 2005, that year, in Maracaibo, Venezuela. So they put me with host families. While you're out there, you go with host families. And I had done my first round with my host family, and then I was with my second host family. And they tend to put you, at least with me, they put you with pretty well-off families who, have established themselves in the community. And my host father was a petroleum engineer. And he was also well regarded in the community because he had like a band where he put together, boys who don't necessarily have as much opportunities as others. And he just did so much as far as outreach and community support. So one day his band was actually throwing a Father's Day barbecue for him, a surprise barbecue. So the gates were open, they were going in and out of the gates. And I mean, just about everywhere in the city has gated communities, or at least gates with locks on them. But the gates were open because it was an open flow type party. And I was actually upstairs. This is back in the day of MSN Messenger. So I was writing, that was like one of Rotary's restrictions. Don't contact your family and friends too often and all of that. But I actually was talking to someone upstairs on MSN Messenger. And I remember coming down the stairs, and my host sister was really, really pale. And she's like olive toned skin. And completely pale. And her eyes were open. And I'm like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And she had a guy's arm around her who wasn't her boyfriend. And she kept telling me, tranquila, hermana, tranquila, telling me to calm down, sister. And I'm like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And he pushed her out the way because I didn't know who this gentleman was. And he had a gun behind her back. And so he pushed her, he told me to get on the ground. And then behind him were 4 others. They came into the house. And basically everyone, that was about 20 of us at the time that was in the house, between the family that lived there, my host brother, my host sister, my mom, my host mom and dad, and their friends, and the band themselves. And they told us all to get on the ground. They had guns. They went through everything. We were held hostage in our own home for hours. A few people were hit upside the head with the gun. A few people were threatened. They threatened to cut my father's finger off. It was a long ordeal. And I just remember thinking to myself at that point, if I make it out of this, then there's got to be more to life. Because prior to this, I was like this arrogant little teen. I was Miss Teen Bermuda. I used to model for Pantene Pro V, and I used to do a few things outside of just schoolwork at the time, right? And that just gives you a bit of an ego when you're that young. And I remember coming to Venezuela, and that whole ego was just stripped really, really fast. But this happened once everything cleared up, once we ended up once it all happened, let's fast forward. Once they ended up leaving, they came back a couple times, but they ended up going, the cameras were gone, they broke those, the internet lines were cut, they took the keys and took the car, they took the keys for the house, they took everything, and threatened that if we were to call the cops or anyone else, that they're police, by the way, I forgot to mention that. They were corrupt police officers that came over the border from Colombia. That they would hear if we called the police or anything like that. So anyway, once they ended up leaving and took everything, that our possessions, everything from my jewelry to underclothes, like it was crazy. They took everything. I remember me, my host sister, my brother and I, we were all standing upstairs just devastated. And my host brother was talking about his GameCube, and my host sister was upset about some things she had lost, and I was upset about some gifts I had purchased for my family back home. And my mom and dad at the time came to me and we're basically saying, you guys still have your lives. And that put it all into perspective. I'm like, here I am worrying about that, right? So that was one thing that really shifted. And even during the ordeal itself, just thinking that, as your life's literally flashing before your eyes, you begin thinking, like I said, if you survive this has to be a bigger thing. It has to be something more for you to do, outside of just having a cool story for your grandkids one day.
Right. Well, it's incredible, man. I mean, that story just gives me chills, and thank you for sharing that, because I can only imagine that it's still to this day. It's like there's probably some trauma around that. A lot of this podcast is about how do we make a bigger impact in less time. And I think sometimes it's those perspective shifting moments where we're all of a sudden faced with our own longevity or lack thereof, right? And in a weird way, I wonder if it's almost a gift to have that happen early in your life, because
for sure,
right?
I honestly feel like we all have hostage moments, right? Whether it's an actual hostage situation like mine, or maybe it's a divorce, or maybe it's a family death, or possibly it's losing your job or being made redundant. All of these things create hostage-like situations where you feel trapped, whether that's physically or emotionally. You feel trapped and you don't know where to go next, or even if you can go anywhere at the moment next. And in those moments, you realize what really matters. Your priorities get realigned, and you really have to figure out what can you do to begin building that legacy for yourself.
You talk about another perspective shifting moment in, I think, 2014, when it sounds like, and I'm going to let you tell this story, but you went from maybe procrastinating on writing a book to all of a sudden something shifted and you got this thing done in 3 months and it went on to become a bestseller. And so I would love to hear from you about what shifted in you in both your mindset and your actions that had you go from maybe dragging your feet on it to all of a sudden taking such massive action and having such incredible results in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it was a few different moments. So the first was obviously the hostage. After that, I was a management trainee. When I came back, I began, trying to climb the corporate ladder. I thought that was my purpose at one point. And I was a management trainee at a bank. I read The Alchemist. So that was another shift perspective where it woke up an entrepreneurial like spirit in me. But I still hadn't acted. It didn't do enough to make me act. And then in 2013, actually, my dad had cancer. He had cancer in his kidney. And again, it was still those thoughts where you're like, man, life's short. He obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, he did survive, luckily. And the following year, my mom was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And while she survived as well, at that moment, when I was at the hospital with her, we were at Johns Hopkins, I started writing the book. I want to say Tiffany Montgomery, I don't know if you know her, but she was doing like a book webinar, something about writing your story. And I was just thinking about the Venezuela story. And I'm like, you know what, let's do this. Because at one time I had read a Pinterest post that was saying, if you need not be forgotten as soon as you're dead, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. So I told myself at that moment, I want to do both. So then when my mom got this news and I was out there in the hospital, I was like, you know what, now's the time. And I decided to start writing. So she ended up, this was in the November area, 2014. She ended up having the surgery in January. And that following February, like the very next month, I was finished writing. So I finished writing the book. It was a bunch of different moments, I think, that pushed me a little bit more. And that last one was just the wake up call where it's like, you start wondering, did my mom live her fullest life? Did she do everything she wanted to do? And I don't want, whether she did or she didn't, I don't want that to be my legacy, ever living in regret. My mom is fine now. Thankfully, she had a surgery, it went well, and to this day, things are still going well. But that moment definitely was a wake up call. So I started just taking massive action. I noticed with myself, I have to do little steps immediately. And that little step prompts me to begin doing a bit more each and every time. So I started, when I did the webinar, I said, you know what, before I go to sleep, I'm gonna start doing the outline. That's all, just one little thing. And once the outline was done, it just prompted a bit of excitement. I knew what was coming next and things started to flow. So I just started writing and I wanted to write. I'm really ambitious. I'm type A. So I'm like, okay, this is the schedule. This is what I'm doing. This is when it's going to be published. So I ended up doing everything really fast at that point.
So much. So, wow. So powerful. It was this total mindset shift, right? And one of the things that it makes me wonder is for people who are listening, if they have something big they want to do to make a bigger impact in the world, whether it's write a book, maybe it's create a keynote, maybe it's, they're looking to further elevate their visibility and their personal brand, but they haven't had one of those life wake-up calls that really shows them straight in I think sometimes like life gives us little whispers. And then if we don't listen, this is my own experience, if we don't listen to the whispers, oftentimes there's this much bigger, like you got to be shown something big. But if people haven't had that big wake-up call, but they really do have that desire to take action and they're just not doing it, what would you suggest to them? Is there like a certain way they could think about things or a certain action they could take to kind of kick themselves out of complacency and realize like at a certain point, you got to just do this thing and get it done?
Yeah, and it is ebbs and flows, right? So even after the book, things slowed down a bit and I then started picking up with my business. So things are ebb and flow. So you aren't always going to have the motivation. And I say that all the time. The motivation isn't always there. So what I find really helpful is to begin surrounding yourself with things and people who are doing, who are producing, who are putting forth really big, massive things. And that may be listening to podcasts like this, that may be following certain people on Instagram or YouTube and checking out their videos. Maybe it's surrounding yourself with people like this in real life through memberships and just finding finding your tribe of people who want to do and who want to succeed and really want to do something in this world. But the motivation definitely isn't always going to be there. And I always compare it to like exercise. Whether you feel like exercising or not, whether you have the motivation to, if you get up and do it, you'll still get results, right? So it's great when the motivation's there because it pushes you to achieve, it pushes you to do a bit more, and to get better results because you have more energy and stamina and, you're just going for it. But it doesn't stop you from getting results when you take that action, even when you aren't 100% driven to do it.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think about how you and I met through a mastermind that we're both a part of. Meeting of the minds. And like you and I met just not that many months ago here in Atlanta. And part of it's so inspiring to me to be surrounded by people like you and other folks in that group who have done really major things in the world. And I think you're so right that sometimes it's just a matter of we have to put ourselves in the room with people who we feel like are performing at an even higher level than we are. Because I remember sitting around the room the first time I went to one of those meetings last year, I remember sitting around the room and being like, oh my God, what is my life going to be about? And how am I going to be known? And that was actually a lot of what prompted some things that have happened, and like creating the Instant Impact Challenge and all sorts of things. But like even you and your online brand that you've built and just a lot of things that you've done gave me the confidence to go out and create this video confidence coaching program that I'm doing now. So I think you're so right. If you don't have that major wake up moment of life looking you in the face and saying, you've got a short amount of time, sometimes it's just surround yourself with people who are doing exceptional things in the world and let that be the fuel to your fire to go out and do it.
Oh, for sure. And another thing is also what I like to call the deathbed perspective. And whether anything traumatic's happening in your life or not, is to ask yourself, if the doctor were to tell you had 30 days left to live, right? If you had only 30 days left on this planet, what do you want your legacy to be? Would you wake up tomorrow and do the same things you've been doing all your life? If you're working a 9 to 5, will you go to your job? What would change? Who will you call? And begin doing those things now. Begin sending those emails, starting that website, speaking to those people you haven't spoken to in a while, and just putting yourself into the person you're meant to be or that you'd like to be, 5, 10, 20 years down the road.
I love that. That gives me chills. I absolutely love that. So I want to do just a little bit of a shift into slightly more tactical conversation, because one of the things that you've done really, really well for yourself is you've built a massive brand. You've built a huge online following. You've got incredible, media partnerships. Like, you've got HuffPost, Success, Refinery 29. You're a contributor to Black Enterprise. Like, you've done all of these amazing things with your brand. And you talk a bit about when you decided you were going to write your book, knowing that you needed to find readers, but you didn't really and you had to grow an audience. But that you didn't just want any audience, you wanted an audience of driven, go-getter women who are just like you, and you've built this audience. And so I'd love to hear from you. How did you go about that intentional audience building and create the online empire that you've created today for yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you. Making me sound like Oprah. I would totally take it. I love it.
I'd put you up there. I'd put you up there with her.
Thanks, Edie. I really appreciate that. The first thing I did when the book was coming out, because in the book it's code. So it's called Lucky Code, but it shares a code from each letter of the alphabet, so A through Z. So I took the 26 codes, and out of the 26, I decided to choose 7 and created a 7 days to a Luckier You challenge. So each day I would send a video, and if I was doing it again now, I'd definitely make it shorter. Our attention spans have shrunk a lot since 2015, but I did the 7-day challenge, each day a video, 1 to 2 minutes, challenging them to do something. So one day, let's say it's practice gratitude, but not just your traditional, grateful for family, food, strength, and friends type gratitude, but really something that happened that day that you can feel. So maybe it's and not just that day, but something that's really specific. So maybe it's the warm bowl of oatmeal you ate, or the hug your child gave you, or, your dog jumping on your lap when you ran home from work, or something. What are those specific things? And I actually encourage them to write me back. And initially my list was 33 people, 30 of which were family and friends. Believe it or not, I twisted their arms to join. By the end of that month, just from doing this one challenge, it grew to 750. And then the following month, it doubled. So what I did, how I got them on there, was using influencers before it was even a real thing. I started reaching out to the larger Instagram pages. I'm sure they charge a lot more these days. But I started reaching out to them who had similar audiences, but not necessarily competitive audiences. So looking at manifestation pages or, healthy eats and things like that, where it was women who I knew were vibrant, that were looking to improve their lives in some way, right? So I reached out to them and they happily began, sharing it with their audience. A few of them did charge, like I think I paid maybe $50 in total. It was not a lot of money at the time. And I was able to share it that way. But from that, I then began doing other things. So more recently in the last couple of years, the really big pages, so we're talking about those in the hundreds of thousands, heavy hundred thousands, like 400,000 and plus, or the millions like Louis House or someone like that. But looking at them, ones that resonate with your audience, or that ones that are similar to your audience, like a mirrored audience. And I would follow the page, usually already following the really big pages that I love. And I turn on notifications now because that's been an option for the last couple of years. And what I did, as soon as they posted, if it was something that I resonated with, I didn't just, hop on everything they posted, but if it was something that really spoke to me, I would comment on there, but not just a regular comment like, oh, cute shoes. Like I wanted to leave something really valuable that can benefit even beyond their comments, right? So I did that, and it started to drive people to my page as well. So that helps a lot. But at the end of the day, I think it really just comes down to creating shareable content and also just adding value as much as you can. Because, the beautiful pictures with the thoughtful comments work really well because you are adding value through motivation and inspiration and things like that. But creating like lists, no matter what your niche is. So for me, recently I've done like my favorite business podcasts and things like that on Canva, just creating the most simple little infographic. And when I look at the shares on those pictures, it's just going so far because it's something someone can share with a friend who may need the information. Whereas a picture of me isn't going to help them that much, right? Maybe give them a little boost, but motivation up, that is. But those little things I find really, really assist. And just really speaking with my audience, I always try to answer every single comment underneath my page, which became pretty difficult yesterday because I was announcing leaving my 9 to 5, and it was like 100 plus comments. Yes. It was 100 plus comments, and it was just going and going and going. I'm like, I'm responding to everybody because to me, it's so important to grow your audience, but grow an engaged audience and grow one that you care about as much as they care about you, and having that conversation and seeing how you can assist them. So I occasionally move from my comment section to their DMs and continue the conversation. Like, how did that post resonate with you? I saw your response underneath there, and just continue it that way. And I find they are the ones who often share it more often. They're the ones who bring other people to your page by tagging friends with something. So I just try, at the end of the day, it all boils down to valuable content, whether that's the 7-day challenge, helping people to, become a better version of themselves. A Guide for Winning at Life is the name of my book. Lucky Code, A Guide for Winning at Life. So it's just valuable things all around, not any of that scammy, schemy, hey, I can flip a couple bucks. Do you need $1,000 real quick? Like those DMs drive me nuts every single day. I'm just like, give people value and you'd find your tribe really quickly.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That was just like a mini masterclass in audience growth. And the thing that I love is everything, it really boils down to, I think, just really simply like, how can you be focused on the other person? And it's a hard mental switch to make when, you hop on and you're like, well, how many followers do I have now? Right. And that's like, we're kind of conditioned to look at that and see how have my numbers grown and how many more people are following me and blah, blah, blah. But the way that you win online or offline is by really looking at, who do I want to serve? Who do I want to be like? Who do I want to emulate? Who has people in their network who I can serve? How can I give value to them? And then going deeper in your conversations with those people in their audience, which is like your example of taking it from the comments into DMs. And that's just, it's like, yes, it is the long game, but it's the one that lasts.
Yes.
And so
It definitely hits us.
Yeah. I love that. Any final words of wisdom for listeners who are listening and they're like, man, this woman is a I'm not going to curse on here, but she's a rock star. I was about to say something else, and I was like, no, that's not what I was saying. But like for people who are listening, like she's a rock star. It's amazing just like the quantum leaps that you've made and the way you've impacted other people. And for people who are listening who want to have that same level of impact and they want to try to do it in less time and they're just like, maybe they're stuck. Any final words of wisdom that you would share for people who are really wanting to make the same type of impact that you've made?
I would just reiterate that it's important to surround yourself with everything that you want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, physically as well as online. So that's the books you're reading, that's the podcast you're listening to, being really intentional about who's around you and what you're allowing in your space. Because at the end of the day, we all have it. We hear the same thing all the time. We all have the same 24 hours, right? And it's all about how we make that. I don't watch TV. So it's I hate using the word sacrifice too, but it's the short-term sacrifices for the long-term gains. We have to be willing to give up either time, probably a bit of all of them, which is time, energy, and finances, because that means, you have to take the courses. You have to, reinvest in your success. And that may mean joining a mastermind, doing an e-course, hiring someone one-on-one. Doing those things is going to assist you to level up and taking yourself seriously so that the world can begin taking you seriously as well.
Mm. Beautiful. That's so beautiful. Thank you. If people are trying to connect with you and want to follow you and be part of the community, tell everyone where they can go to find all things Gaynete online.
So my website is gaynete.com, and I know that my name is so difficult. I actually used to hate it as a child, but I've grown to love it because no one had my URL. So it's Gaynete, which is GAYNETE.com. And I'm the same on every platform. And that's another strategy I do because it makes you easily able to find and to search for and to share if they know where you are. So my Instagram, YouTube, Twitter handle, everything's Gaynete.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, my friend. Your warmth, your bravery, and the way that you just lead by example in everything you do is so inspiring. So you inspire me every time I talk to you. And I'm so excited that we could share this with all my listeners today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Elise. I'm really glad you invited me on this podcast. I know it's going to be absolutely amazing because you're so awesome. You are pumping me up today, but you are doing so much great in this world. And I know your course is going to be so beneficial for those who are really having a tough time with video, because video assists you to connect so much these days. You're able to resonate with your audience a lot better. And I know it's a big fear of a lot of people. And with your personality and your know-how, that course has to be the best course out there on this.
Thank you. It's a love fest. I love it. All right, my dear, I will see you soon. And thank you guys so much for joining us today. And I can't wait to see you again on the next episode. Bye for now.